Demo discs are sort of a lost art. The feeling of opening up a brand new gaming magazine, finding and pulling out that sleeved disc, was one that I always thoroughly enjoyed. Looking over the front of the disc and reading off titles of games that you were excited for, or even ones you had never heard of, and knowing that soon you'd be able to experience these anxiously awaited games is, and always will be, a special little personal moment. The menus for these things were always fun little bonuses that you got alongside the games. They were usually very personalized and were drenched in very late 90s to mid 2000s and even late 2000s aesthetics. In the current age of digital downloads and the concept of needing a physical disc to actually play a game becoming more and more outdated, you don't really find the active demos being pushed nearly as hard. It might just be me thinking back with fondness over these old demo discs, but each one really felt special. A window into the future. It's really hard to replicate that feeling these days, but the folks over at itch.io were doing a pretty good job with their frequent haunted PS1 demo discs, which recapture that feeling of scrolling through a menu of games you may or may not be aware of, all made by indie devs that potentially hide some real gems. But recently Steam started pushing these Next Fests, an event for developers to push demos of their games to the masses so that their titles can be experienced and felt in a digital age. This is the first one that I actively participated in, and as you can see, I downloaded quite a few. And to be brutally honest, I would have kept downloading them, but I actually needed to sit down and work on this at some point, so I capped it off the day I'm writing this. And even more honestly, as of the day I'm starting to write this, all of the demos I've played so far have been pretty good. If you have any other suggestions of games I should be on the lookout for, leave them in the comments, and I'll try to get around to them when I can. Hey, what's up, people? It's me, your favorite, Sputnik boy. I don't know what the fuck to call me. You can skip here if to this time code if you just want to get to the video, but I want to make a quick message. It is 1:43 in the morning. I'm recording this before I go to bed on the day before I finish making this video. I just want to make a quick PSA saying, I don't normally do this sort of thing, but I worked very hard on this video. I put a lot of fucking time into it. And I would really appreciate it if you like and subscribed, because it would help me out a lot. But I really appreciate you for taking the time to even watch me say this to your face. This is who I am. It's me. I'm not just hidden behind the camera all the time. But yeah, I hope you find a game or two that you enjoy through this list. I tried to play a lot of games that weren't, or at least I tried to play games, some games that weren't as normally seen as, like, you know, Cult of the Lamb and stuff, even though games like that are in there. I tried to find some more lesser known ones too. So hopefully you find something you like. Thanks for watching. I love your face. I love your show. Whew. I'm going to start this off with a bang, because I have known about this game for what feels like 2, maybe 3 years. It's a GZ Doom mod, which also helps because my last mainline video was also about a Doom mod that makes it look almost unrecognizable. Selaco is an FPS set on the titular Mars station, and you play as Dawn, a presumed Special Forces captain during the middle of a complete alien takeover at the station. Things are not good, but this game is good. Very good. Like holy shit good. Like, how the fuck did they manage to pull this off good? The gameplay, the rootin' tootin' point and shootin' parts of the gameplay that is, does feel very Doom-like. It's still got the super fast frantic pace that you remember from the old Doom games, but it's also got this added, very important tactical focus now. You can flip over tables and stretchers, turn off lights, close shutter doors, slide to cover, hide in darkness, and more. Selaco is all tactical, all cover, all the time. The developers of Selaco say that fear was a big inspiration for it, and you do get those occasional rushes of fear juices when you have to maneuver your way around cover to get a better angle on your enemies, exposing yourself to gunfire and sliding your way over to where you need to be. The gunplay of Selaco is just fucking out of this world. The graphical effects coming out of the GZ Doom engine are incredible, all the way down to your super fluid reload animations. The light blazing out of the barrel of your guns as you barrage your enemies with bullets honestly looks so good that it might be better than some AAA game gun effects. The sound design makes every single gun sound punchy, heavy, brutal, and real. Every bullet potentially feels like your last in a desperate attempt to stay alive, and it only fuels the relentless action of Selaco. The enemy AI is another connection to Link the Fear inspiration from, as they are relentless in their hunting down and finding of you. Often, they try to flank you and outmaneuver you at any chance they can. It's this tactical advantage that they utilize as a squad that really makes the difficulty of Selaco shine. It's not just that they're robots that never miss that makes it difficult, it's the combat dance itself, and it's fucking beautiful. Enemies tend to sound cocky at the start of fights, but as you take more of their squad out, they start getting audibly panicked and desperate, which only makes you feel more and more like a goddamn superhero as you slide from cover to cover, poking your head out and making them explode into a cavalcade of purple guts and dismembered body parts. The demo is filled to the brim with secrets, hidden areas, special doors that require certain keys, and more. This is where the game doesn't hide its Doom origins, because even after beating the demo about 4 times, I can only find maybe 20% of these fucking secrets in this one fucking level. It's nuts how well hidden some of these things are. I was starting to feel like the dev put these numbers here as a psychological endurance test to make you think you weren't doing as good of a job as you thought you were, but nope, they are all there. If I had some criticisms, and they are minor, they would be that it feels weird that you can't be shooting and go into zoom mode on your assault rifle at the same time. You have to literally stop shooting and then zoom before you can continue, which breaks up the frantic nature of gunplay, especially if the enemy is a little bit farther away than your normal aiming can muster. Another thing is that the shotgun works on a realistic design where if you shoot it and swap to another gun before pumping, you'll need to pump the shotgun before you can shoot it after you pull it back out. I'm not complaining about this particularly, this is fine, but the only way that you can pump it is by clicking the shoot button. And after a frantic gunfight or even during one, it can be hard to remember if you've done so, and I think the best way to keep this in is by letting you pump the gun by clicking the reload button or something other than the shoot button. Because if you want to make sure that it's pumped, and it is already, and you don't want to get caught with your pants down in the middle of a fight, is to risk a 50-50 chance of wasting a shotgun shell, and it just feels kind of wrong to force that on me with using the shoot button. Other than that though, there is hardly much to complain about in the demo for Selaco. I cannot wait for this, and the demo is varied and long enough that I am content playing it over and over until it comes out.
I will furnish you with great weaponry, and you must fight towards your true end.
This is one that I downloaded on a whim, and one that I sunk a little decent chunk of time into. Perish is a first-person roguelike where you play as what I can only assume is a non-decrepit corpse brought back to life by some ancient entity, requiring you to battle your way through whatever ancient force that they don't like for revenge or something. To be honest, I didn't pay that much attention to the story, but the demo does have segments of story for you to find if you do care about that sort of thing. The gameplay of Perish is pretty straightforward, but the demo highlights a lot of potential fucking around that looks like it will spice up the game quite a bit. As it stands, the core combat of Perish is very floaty, but also precise, if that makes any sense. You have a standard attack with an axe that can chain up to a 3-hit combo, which feels good, but doesn't feel like the animation matches up with your melee range pretty much at all. You can block attacks, kick motherfuckers, and dash out of danger as well. The game is also surprisingly difficult even for a roguelike. In my brief experience with Perish, I wasn't able to make it out of the second phase of the game on my own. This means I'm bad at video games. On top of that, your jump is like... what? All of these things end up making the game feel like it's trying to mash God of War, a little bit of Dark Souls, and a dash of Doom Eternal. This all sounds good on paper, and in execution it works, but what really ties it all together is the roguelike aspects. You have a shop that you can buy from before each run that supplies you with consumables like AoE effects and potentially health restoration, throwable weapons, and more. But there's also a weapon shop that looks like it mixes old style weapons like an axe wrapped in leather to a fucking sniper rifle? There are also crowns that give benefits such as extra health, more melee damage, and rings that also add little bonuses that you can stack up to 6 with. In my experience, the first level of the main game's runs have one objective that you need to beat before you can progress to each level. Each time you complete the level's main objective, you get a choice perk from 3 randomly distributed stat bonuses. These range from more melee damage, attack range, poison damage, and more. In my experience, there are around 3 or 4 randomly assorted missions that cycle, keeping the variety up and the enjoyment levels where they need to be in order for you to keep coming back run after run. Parish is also a game that you can play multiplayer with friends, and with the mission variety and build diversity that seems to be possible in the full game, I can see this becoming quite popular after it's released. I played the demo briefly with a friend, and while the essential gameplay never changed all that much, the overall game is significantly improved by just having a friend to banter with and plan out route for victory. There is also the added benefit of being able to craft multiple builds that can potentially be devastating when all paired together. I had the most fun playing Parish while with a friend and combating in unison. From extinguishing 4 blazing fires to vanquishing a horde of spawning enemies, Parish is definitely one to keep an eye out for. Okay, so I downloaded 2 Backrooms games, and I'm just going to knock them both out in one go. What found footage does in this demo is essentially an endurance run. The demo starts you out in a room with a note from someone who has been here for what seems like weeks. They tell you what they know about this place and leave notes on the wall about not drinking the carpet water. The strongest thing going for found footage is the feeling of isolation. The goal of the demo, as far as I can tell, is just get as far as you can while managing a set of stats, such as H2O, hunger, and stamina, avoiding randomly spawning monsters, managing the darkness with a flashlight, and potentially having to sleep to apparently respawn in different areas of the Backrooms. Found footage for what it is fine, I guess, but it takes the idea of the Backrooms and, in my opinion, turns it into something that it isn't. Or at least something that I think is adjacent to what I believe it to be. The Backrooms, to me, isn't just an assortment of big empty spaces occupied by random walls. It's a place with randomly assorted patterns. And I know that sounds like a really nitpicky thing to say, but I fully believe that no game trying to imitate or pass themselves off as the Backrooms has been able to accomplish this. But as far as the actual gameplay of found footage goes, it's pretty bare bones. You have to find food, water, and medication to maintain previously mentioned stats, but also meander around these empty spaces and look for another manila room with another note left by what I can only assume is the same person. I haven't been able to make it very far, but I would rather wait for the full game to come out before I really give it another go because the demo explicitly says that it's meant to destroy you. The full game will have more levels and areas and also a more clear direction and a mechanic-first campaign. The biggest slight I have against this demo is that you can download a full game that is essentially this exact one without the status management called the Backrooms game. It's not much better in terms of like world design and actual gameplay, but it feels more like the Backrooms than this demo does. The other Backrooms demo I played is one called The Backrooms Exploration. And with a title like that, you would think that this game would be more, ambient exploration due to its title, but it's actually quite the opposite. It's a very objective-heavy puzzle-influenced title. It starts you off in a liminal supermarket, and the initial impressions I had were very strong. It feels like one of the best games to utilize the liminal space that I've played in recent memory, and the weird pixely graphical style really does help aid in that. Everything hits that perfect balance of feeling familiar and also strangely off. There are 2 modes that you can play. One of them is the standard game mode where you are given incredibly vague instructions towards your goal for each area of the game. And the other is called simulation. And while this is what I started the game with because I wanted to feel the game more than anything, I have to say that I recommend that you do not play this version of the game until you have beaten the normal version at least once, maybe twice. What simulation mode does is put you into the game with zero guidance and zero direction. Now, while this may sound like a good thing because as a liminal space game that does well at capturing the feeling of a liminal space, the puzzles are shockingly bare bones in design, but cryptic as hell in execution. For example, I started the game on the simulation, and the supermarket has many locked doors, but one in particular requires a key card. So you think, okay, well, I'll look around for a key card. You wander around the whole store, looking at the cash registers, the back bakery, and inside every nook and cranny, and find no key card. After about 30 minutes of aimless wandering, I gave up and booted the game on the intended difficulty. You're told that you need to look for something with a yellow glow that only we can see, so you think, okay, we must be referring to the store clerks. So you wander around to the cash registers because they all have a yellow glow emanating from the employee's side due to the screens. But alas, there's nothing. So you look around for everything yellow in the whole store and also find nothing. It turns out the thing you're looking for is not a keycard, but a piece of paper, and it's in the milk section, and for some reason it's glowing yellow. The clue of only we can see doesn't really seem to make sense in this context at all, but whatever. Even with all of these clues, the game is still really cryptic and comes across as tedious in execution because after a while you're not experiencing the feeling of a liminal space, but instead meandering around a bare bones layout looking for a crouton among a mile-wide salad. When you actually get to the Backrooms, it still follows this objective-based concept which, like found footage before it, feels like it goes against the concept of a liminal space. But because of this, the simulation mode is the worst possible game mode to play because you're obviously meant to be doing something, but you're going to be stuck there for potentially your entire life because you actually have close to zero idea of what you're doing. If you want to simulate the feeling of wandering around a maze that has incredibly foggy objectives for what will feel like forever, then yeah, play simulation mode. That being said, the design of the Backrooms itself is much better implemented than found footage. It's hard to describe what I think it does right in comparison, but I would say that it captures the feeling of random geometry much better, and it feels a lot less like big empty rooms with random walls than most games that attempt the Backrooms. If you think I'm being a little bit too hard on the design of the Backrooms in both of these games, then watch the Backrooms video on YouTube and actually look at what's being presented there, and then come back and tell me that either of these games actually replicate that feeling even a little bit. I think I could summarize my overall feeling on both of these games' demos by saying that if you want a game that really captures the essence of a liminal space and is still a good game, then you should download and play the latest build of Anemoiopolis. Okay, first of all, people keep saying that this is like GoldenEye 2, but I'm going to be the contrarian here and say this is Perfect Dark 2. The demo was essentially a Bizarro World remake of the initial Datadyne level from Perfect Dark. Also, the guns look like the ones in Perfect Dark. This is an incredibly stupid thing to take issue with, but I get hung up on things, okay? Anyway, this demo is fucking fantastic. I've literally played it like 20 times. It's short, sweet, and to the point, and also does the best thing a demo of this nature can do, and that is not only give you 3 difficulties with varying mission objectives, but a par timer. I've pretty much already explained what this demo is, but I'll just briefly say that it's essentially a third rare shooter in terms of design and graphical aesthetics. As an ancient, soon-to-be-dead grandpa that grew up with these games, I can safely say that they capture the essence pretty well. It's definitely a game that wears its influences not only on its sleeves, but also on the back of its head. It's so straightforward in its design and gameplay that literally all I need to say is that if you have any nostalgic feelings toward the rare shooters of the 64 era, then you have zero excuse to at least not play this demo. It's fluid, the guns feel as accurate as they seem they should be, and you breeze through it if you know what you're doing, and above all, the objectives feel well designed. But I'm going to be honest and say that there isn't much more I can say, apart from the fact that this demo is fantastic, love nearly every second of it, can't wait for the full game. Super Metroid is and always will be my first favorite game. While Metroidvanias are a genre that I still thoroughly enjoy, I feel like it's a hard formula to get right. And because of that, it's a genre of game that I don't partake in super frequently. I'll always argue that some of my favorite games, in a sense, are still Metroidvanias, but a strictly formulaic and good one is honestly a welcome change of pace in my repertoire. Ghost Song appears to be that to a T. In it, you play as what is described as a dead suit, a robot that has apparently been defunct for what seems to be hundreds of years. You're equipped with a blaster cannon as an arm, a la Samus from Metroid. And in the demo, you wake up on the surface of what appears to be a planet completely covered in foliage, and the only thing to do is move forward. As gameplay and design goes, Ghost Song is pretty standard Metroidvania fare, but it has a nice few little twists in it that make it stand out to me. The single coolest one is a mechanic of your gun being able to overheat. Your gun can be rapid fired by holding down the shoot button, and after so many shots the gun will start to heat up and has the potential of overheating, and when this happens, your fire rate will decrease. This seems like a bad idea for a game of this nature because you're going to be shooting stuff a lot, and a lot of enemies take a lot of shots to kill. The thing though that makes this mechanic sing is the fact that you can also melee attack with your cannon. The melee attack is a 3-hit combo and it deals more and more damage the hotter your cannon has gotten. It's such a simple little idea that adds a very nice little added dimension to combat. What is another cool addition to the game, while not being unique to Ghost Song, is a subtle build system where you will find add-ons to your dead suit throughout the world that will give added stat bonuses to you. These range from more resistance to heat on your gun, allowing you to shoot more before you overheat, and adding to your overall firepower, and from the looks of it, the range of abilities that you'll be able to find will provide a huge range of builds that you'll be able to craft throughout the main game. But one of the best things that I found while playing Ghost Song, and the thing that made it really stand out to me, is the atmosphere. There is something so somber and captivating about Ghost Song. Just traversing its world makes you feel like the dead suit after waking up after so long. When you discover certain areas of the game that hint at the world before your time, the game really tends to push you towards lingering in that area for a little while. Deadsuit will comment on the area around her and ask questions to herself. You'll also at one point run into an area where a disembodied voice seems to be trying to communicate with you. And it also hints at something both more sinister and potentially something more tragic. At this point in time, it's kind of hard to tell. But Ghost Song is easily a standout among even my favorite games from this little stint at Next Fest, and almost no matter what happens, I'm going to be buying this one when it's released. Gloomwood touts itself as a survival horror game at the difficulty selection, but the game feels more like a stealth game sprinkled with survival horror mechanics. The game's influences seem to range from like a mix of Bloodborne in terms of the world aesthetics, and the old Thief games in terms of strict gameplay mechanics with a dash of that pre-mentioned survival horror in there to help spice it up. The game is played in a first-person perspective and uses stealth elements to aid in the tense focus that the game is obviously going for. The main enemies of the game, at least in the demo, appear to be these grunt enemies that have these glowing eyes that indicate their threat level, which is a very fun, nice, gamey sort of visual aid. And I like that aspect quite a bit. The demo for Gloomhaven starts incredibly strong with a heavy dose of atmosphere of what feels like an old English, early American Gothic town with a sprawling architecture, and does a good job of making you feel completely out of your element, which only helps in the tinge of horror that it's going for. But one of the best things that the demo does is trickle in the horror elements steadily to you. For the first half of the demo, I thought that the game was a horror game in the sense that it was using the gothic world as a warm thematic blanket to put over a sleepy, stealth-loving baby. The game starts you off with a threaded cane sword, which seems to be your main weapon for the game, as even though you will be getting guns in Gloomwood, your ammo will be brutally scarce. The sword can be swung indefinitely, but there is also a charge attack that can one-shot enemies if you sneak up on them and surprise them. But that's what made the demo for Gloomwood so compelling. The first half is all about teaching you the mechanics in what is essentially a giant tutorial. The best part about it is that even though there are prompts that come up on the screen telling you things about the game's controls and mechanics, none of that really feels like a tutorial at all. Especially when you finally hit the streets of Gloomwood proper and start leaning around corners, throwing bottles, and backstabbing people on your own. Once you start getting a feel for the game's mechanics and the world, the experience of Gloomwood truly becomes a game that I was confident would have been in my top 5 demos of Next Fest. The level design is impeccably good, with so many pathways that loop back around to places you've been before, giving you that coveted Dark Souls experience. The combat is obviously coming second to the stealth elements of the game, as your sword's main attack is hilariously pathetic. And what makes it even worse is that ammo for the guns that you find is comically scarce. I think in the entire demo you get a total of 12 or 13 pistol shots, which means a maximum of 2 full chambers. And to put that into perspective, if you use a pistol to kill an enemy, that takes upwards of 4 or 5 shots. Yeah, shit's brutal. But as the game unfurls out and you find yourself in the town's cistern, the horror elements really make themselves known with the introduction of the Crowmen, an incredibly dangerous enemy that can easily take you out with one misplaced foot in the darkness. And this is where, in my opinion, Gloomwood starts to lose me a little bit. I like games with stealth elements, but not so much ones that are more or less an immediate fail state if you do not succeed in the stealth sections of the game. And I'm not exactly sure where exactly Gloomwood is going to be at the end of everything once it's released. When you get to the final stage of the demo, you're in a room with many of the Crowmen as the only enemies, and you have no other option than to do it perfectly because you have 0 defense against the horde of the lot if you manage to slip up. While I did manage to beat the demo, I fear what may lie ahead of me, because I really did not enjoy the sudden 50-50 of a success or a loss that the end portion of the demo gave me. And that's a me thing for sure, but it definitely left a weird taste in my mouth because I found the opening of the demo to be so strong. So I'm going to have to wait to see exactly where Gloomwood is on the stealth scale when it's released. Yo, this shit goes hard. I had no idea what this was when I downloaded it. I just saw zombies and shooting stuff, so imagine my surprise when I opened it and discovered that it's essentially a fan-made House of the Dead knockoff that you can apparently use a light gun with. But even if you don't own a light gun, the demo for this is still a swell time. It's all the things that you love about those old House of the Dead games, all the way down to rescuing really stupid people that walk into your line of fire. There are multiple pathways and hidden items and weapons that you can find, plus there's a combo system where if you can maintain accuracy, you'll gain more and more points per shot, until you miss, in which case the combo will reset. If I had anything bad to say about this, it's that the demo especially is piss easy. I only died once, and that was because I was being hit off screen by a zombie that I couldn't shoot at because of the on-rail nature of the game. Apart from that, in my 2 separate runs of the demo, I only got hit, I think, once, and the boss wasn't even the one that did it. But I'm sure that's a case of the demo being the first level of the game. I'm sure that in the full release, the difficulty will pick up a bit. But even with that, Biocrisis 2 is a surprise find, and one that I recommend you keep an eye out for. This is another one that I grabbed on a complete whim, and one that I'm really glad I did. Mortal Sin is a horror-themed dungeon-crawling roguelike that takes a few hints from Dead Space, where the key to victory is dismembering your enemies. The game is pure melee, at least as far as I can tell in the demo, and it has an art style that I'm sure is a love it or hate it kind of an affair. I'm personally a fan of it, as I think it really sets the overall mood for the game. It fits in with the mild horror vibe that the game is going for. But as far as the overall game is concerned, it is your standard roguelike fare where you wander through randomly generated dungeons, going from floor to floor, and seeing how long you can make it in each run. It has a few neat little tricks up its sleeves though, that make it one that I thoroughly enjoyed my time with. The first trick is the aforementioned dismemberment mechanic. Enemies will go down much faster if you can pinpoint certain parts of their body and take them off bit by bit. The other really cool thing that it does is invite a combo system. So you can swing your weapon multiple times, but it's really slow and will not normally count towards a combo. What you have to do is maintain a double or even triple attack chain where you bash, kick, and swing repeatedly. And if you can time it correctly, and especially in a horde of monsters, you can chain up to like 15 or 20 hits in one combo and just devastate the entire playing field. It feels wonderful to pull something like that off, and while I'm not great at it, the unlockable windmill attack will surely help even the worst players. And that is another thing. You unlock stuff really fast in this game. Your very first run will probably get you at least 2 or 3 unlocks that will stay with you throughout your time in the demo, and most likely the main game. But if you look at the progress tree, you can just see all of these things that are waiting to be unlocked. The game also uses a really cool stat and equipment mechanic. You'll be able to grab gear throughout your runs as well as carry 2 different weapons. Each of these things will provide unique bonuses to your stats as well as potential special abilities like making enemies explode if they hit a trap or being able to take less damage from projectiles. The use of stats in games like these tend to either be really simple to the point where you almost wonder why they even bothered, or extremely complicated where you feel like you have to do algebra to figure out if a boot is worth being able to pick up. But Mortal Sin is a perfect balance of those two. You have damage, defense, speed, crit chance, and health. There is also spell effectiveness and spell damage, but those are only required stats if you decide to try to go for a spell build during your run. But these numbers never get too complicated. The numbers are all pretty neat, whole numbers, with occasional dips into decimal digits. And percentages are only really brought up with crit chances and overall speed. In a sense, this sort of feels like an FPS Diablo roguelike, hints of Dead Space. But I had a blast on my 5 or 6 runs trying out varying builds that you can potentially go for. Me being me, I've accepted the fact that I like to bash it over the head until it pops, but even then I managed to get a crit chance of over like 50 on my best run, and let me tell ya, it felt pretty good. It seems like the devs put a shit ton of time into potential hours sunk into this game, and I think that for anyone that really enjoys a solid roguelike, this is one to keep an eye out for. I loved it. Sometimes we play games for really deep reflections of the world around us. Games like Omori or Silent Hill 2 tell narratives so good that you could potentially see the world differently after experiencing them. Some games like Lisa the Painful can make mechanics part of the central focus of the narrative. Some games delve into heavy topics, and some games still like Before Your Eyes are all about narrative. These all take conventions of video games and turn them around for something important. But sometimes you just wanna kick a fucking helicopter! Anchorfoot is just an amazing fucking time. It's one of those intentionally bizarre, absurd concepts that have just been fine-tuned to near perfection. Just about every single thing about this demo is polished to a sheen. From the kick mechanic, to the shooting, all the way down to the music. This game is essentially Hotline Miami, but a first-person shooter and with a fucking hilarious kick mechanic. It's called Anchorfoot for a reason, and your kick can one-shot any enemy in the game. It can also kick doors entirely off their hinges, killing anyone directly behind your foot's fantastical fucking fury. But that's not all. You can also pick up guns from your fallen enemies, but in a really genius move of making you feel the anger and the momentum of your character, there is no reloading in the game. If you run out of ammo or you just feel like it, you can throw your gun out of your hands, potentially stunning an enemy, and you can grab another gun off the ground. It keeps the rhythm of combat lightning fast, which is exactly where it needs to be. Speaking of rhythm, what Mick Gordon did on the Doom franchise in the past 2 entries has been an amazing thing to see unfold in the game industry. His use of varying sections of the song depending on the intensity of what's happening on the screen has really revolutionized music in games. Angerfoot takes that concept and goes balls to the fucking wall. Even in your downtime, the fast-paced rhythm of these songs will get your blood boiling, but when you even kick one door down, it's gloves off and the music just goes off the fucking rails. It fuels your in-game character and makes you feel like an unstoppable killing machine. Music done this well in a game this fun makes dying not feel like a punishment, even though each death literally makes you start each level from the very beginning. Every single attempt is a complete, emotional, overwhelming bullet barrage where you feel like your entire body is just vibrating with juices that you had no idea that you even had. If a game can make you grit your teeth, bob your head, and make you want to just scream with how overwhelmingly fun it is, there is something to be said for that alone. There is almost no better game in the Next Fest that I can think of that can remind you of just how fucking fun video games can be. This is another really nice little find that I stumbled across. I had no prior knowledge of this game whatsoever before I downloaded it, but I could tell that it was a post-apocalyptic game and was another one built out of the GZ Doom engine. I wasn't quite exactly sure what the game was going to be because the game looked like it was going to be a Doom-inspired survival sim. I wasn't sure where or how these things were going to blend together, but luckily, the game is a lot more straightforward than I thought it would be. Apocalyptic Vibes, at least as far as I can tell from the demo, is a very atmospheric post-apocalyptic shooter where you mostly push forward through a series of small levels, find items for health and stat bonuses, find and use keys, and shoot dudes. Being a Doom mod, I'll go over the main attraction here, and that is simply the main gunplay. This was the nicest surprise because, at its heart, the game is still just a shooter. In the demo, you're only given a revolver pistol and it does its job. The gun is not responsive, but it's done in a very realistic manner, where you feel the time that it takes for the hammer to cock back and hit the bullet out of the chamber. The audio feels very visceral too. Each shot feels like you should be feeling some kickback in real life as the light flashes from the muzzle of the gun. Whenever you manage to kill an enemy scavenger, there is a disgusting yet satisfying thud that will occur when they fall to the floor, only adding to the realistic, visceral feeling that the game manages to strive for. The sound design and music of the game is interesting as well. I'm not sure if the game uses original music or copyrighted music, I guess I'll figure that out when I post this video, but it seems to be like a nice, relaxing yet desolate mix of shoegaze with like a little sprinkle of trip-hop. It adds to the completely empty feeling that the game conveys to you as you hear the rustling of empty wind in the barren world. The inventory system is as complex as you would ever want it to be for a game like this. It more or less works like a big pocket where you can cycle between 5 or 6 items that you manage to find, and as far as I can tell, they are mostly exclusive to healing items and other restorative items. There's also a very interesting mild mix of jumping puzzles in the demo. The best instance of them is a section where you have to jump across the side of a building while also maintaining a wall line of enemies shooting at you through holes in the wall. It's sufficiently difficult, and it also captures the desperation of the apocalypse better than any other part of the demo. There's very briefly touched on mechanics in the game as well, such as like a stamina system and a hood system where you have to put a hood over your body in order to avoid acid rain. What ties these two mechanics together is that if you jump into a puddle of this pooled up acid rain, then it affects your overall stamina. It's an interesting little touch to the world design and gameplay that I like. It's a pretty short demo, and there isn't much to say about this one, but I like the vibe that the game is going for, and the very visceral gameplay makes it one that I'll at least keep an eye out for. Of course, Devolver has some of the best demos at Next Fest. Cult of the Lamb is another roguelike, but this one is above all the other ones that I've played at the time of writing. First of all, it is easily the most polished out of any that I've played, but that's also not really a fair distinction as Devolver has, well, Devolver money. But its art style is fucking adorable! You play as a little lamb who is about to be sacrificed in an attempt to prevent a prophecy. It's not common for a game to make me care so much so fast about a main character. But I mean, just look at him. He's big old sad eyes. It's so fucking sad. How dare they? But your little lamb lad is rescued by what I can only presume is a demon or something for the sole purpose of starting a cult in order to bring him back to the real world and probably overthrow these evil fuckers. Even though it's probably going to backfire, there's no way it's not going. But what makes Cult of the Lamb amazing is not only its Binding of Isaac use of roguelike elements, but its cult aspects. So, Cult of the Lamb works as most roguelikes. You have a melee weapon, and you go through little Zelda square-like dungeon layouts where you can kill enemies, earn money, earn perks and stat bonuses, save a fellow forest animal that you can later incorporate into your burgeoning cult, and gather resources such as grass, stone, wood, and more. But the cult aspect of the game is where things change completely. It becomes a balancing of maintaining your recruited cultists by making them food, providing them housing, and maintaining a healthy lifestyle for them. And doing that will make them all the more subservient to your inevitable overthrowing of the malicious monsters malevolently maintaining monstrous mastery over these little innocent animals. The demo doesn't allow you to do much apart from making a little cooking corner and a small meal for your one fellow cultist, but the advertisements for the game imply that you're going to be maintaining hundreds, possibly 1,000 or more at a time in the full release. This, I want to say simple edition, but it's probably not a simple edition, of what is essentially an entirely new game underneath the main campaign adds a perfect level of added strategy for you in the main part of the game. I feel like there is a lot more that I could go into because I feel like the game speaks for itself and Devolver is big enough that I feel like you know about this one already. Just know that it has my glowing endorsement and I cannot wait for this one to come out. Okay, I swear I didn't mean to add so many roguelikes in this list. It just kind of happened that way. Deadlink is a first-person arena... Deadlink is a first-person arena shooter roguelike that takes place entirely in a cyberpunk simulation. Gameplay-wise, it seems to take the biggest inspiration from Doom Eternal. From the dash mechanics, to the floating ammo orbs, and the grappling hook, all the way down to the very arcadey feel of the gunplay, just feels straight out of the book of Doom Eternal. It's almost like the dev team sat at the table on the first day and said, what if Doom Eternal, but only good bits? The game's roguelike elements are personally my favorite execution of roguelikes in general. You have a shell that has a preset layout. The one that you get in the demo has a shotgun, a rocket launcher, the aforementioned grapple mechanic, and a scanner which will mark targets that it hits, giving you armor on kills. The game works in an arena shooter exosuit, and every time that you manage to beat an arena, you will usually get a few option of doors that will provide different bonuses. These bonuses range from permanent upgrades to your suit that will be constant passive abilities that will last until the end of the run. These range from permanent upgrades to damage from your grapple hook and being able to instantly pick up all drops by a downed enemy. Another option will give you experience that you can use after each run that are permanent additions to all unlockable shells in the game. Another will give you coins that you can use to upgrade your gear during each run, and another still will give you stat bonuses. What makes these roguelike mechanics and this game absolutely fucking incredible is the blending of all of these separate mechanics. The best part about the stat bonuses is that there are two different kinds that you can get. One is a very static boost and decrease to specific numerical values in the game, such as skill damage, critical damage, speed, health, and more. But the other that you can get is a suit upgrade that will provide an active skill bonus as well as a passive one. The brilliance of this mechanic is that your suit will have 4 options. Each option has a different battery level that essentially is equal to the amount of power being supplemented to your suit. Each of these upgrades that you can receive require a certain level of battery. So you have to micromanage the suit upgrades and decide what upgrades go where, and on top of that, you also have to think about which upgrade fits each suit ability the best. For instance, the scanner ability that will mark enemies fits well with an ability that will stun enemies, so you get an easier shot on them. Maybe you want your grapple to deal extra damage. Maybe giving your weapons an elemental bonus on weapon swapping is more your game. This is so brilliant, and the fact that I have to work on this video and not play this game is actually kind of killing me inside. So far, this is my number 1 game of Next Fest. I have said so many times while playing this demo, flying across the skies and sending rockets to my enemies down below this is the best fucking game ever made. While in hindsight, I don't necessarily believe that, you have to understand that the feeling that I felt in that moment was real, and I think that means something. There is a lot more that I can go into about how the shooting feels great and the feeling of momentum that you get while grappling is just marvelous. But I could probably talk about how enjoyable the game is for far too long. Just wishlist Deadlink. Moonscars is the second Metroidvania that I've played this Next Fest, and I'm very happy to say that both of the ones that I've played at the time of writing this are very enjoyable. This game lingers less on the side of Metroid and more on the side of a Souls-like, but in a really brilliant little twist of genres, Moonscars uses a very light dash of some roguelike elements in there as well. The core gameplay of Moonscars is very standard. In the heart of it all, it's very similar to fellow Souls Metroidvania like Blasphemous. If you enjoyed Blasphemous, then I have no qualms telling you to just throw this one on your wishlist. But if you haven't, then let me give you a very brief rundown. You have a big sword and you brutally bash baddies with your big bitchin' blade. You have some tricks up your sleeve such as a dodge, or I guess more well put, a dash mechanic that you can use to get behind enemies. Doing this will actually give you a huge burst of sword-swinging shenanigans. This means that you'll be quickly dashing behind and in front of a bunch of enemies. You also have a skill tree that you'll be unlocking a pretty nice chunk of abilities out of, that you'll be able to rotate between your 2 trigger buttons. The demo gives you an energy blast, a poison ability, and essentially a dagger throw. Each of these have their own uses, and I'm interested to see how much you'll actually be able to branch out the skill tree in the final game. The thing that closest bridges Blasphemous and Moonscars is the parry mechanic. Both game systems work more or less the same, but in Moonscars it will allow you to counter an enemy's attack, dealing a huge chunk of damage back at them, and also knock them far back, giving you more room to breathe or to dash towards them and blindly swing at them, potentially dealing enough damage to essentially insta-kill them. There are also air attacks and a plummet attack that you can do, but they're more utility than something you would use in your main repertoire. There's also a very briefly touched on mechanic of transposing your body into clay or something to give you like a super weapon that does a very specific additional damage or stat bonus. The mechanic in the demo seems simple in concept but sort of confusing in execution. But to the main point here, Moonscars is not a roguelike, but what elements it does use from that genre are very interesting. As you kill enemies, you will slowly fill up a meter. And when you fill it up, you will gain the ability to give yourself one of 3 stat bonuses, such as more healing per second, longer lingering negative effects on enemies, and spell cost being returned to you upon use. When you die, you don't have to restart a run, so to speak, but you will lose all of your gained stat bonuses that you built up before you died. There is also elements of story that the demo presents to you, but to be honest, it's the classic cryptic style of FromSoft storytelling where I honestly don't know what is happening pretty much the entire time. While Moonscars doesn't do anything revolutionary for a Metroidvania, that simple addition of the mild roguelike elements already make this one to look out for. Okay, this one is not a roguelike, I swear. This is a point-and-click adventure game in a world of anthropomorphic animals that feels like, apart from the crystal clear 4K resolution, could have been plopped right out of a 90s CD-ROM. I grew up playing games like Myst and stuff, but I was never able to finish them under pretty much any circumstance that wasn't me looking at a book telling me what to do every step of the way. As I've gotten older though, I've grown quite nostalgic over this old genre of game, and seeing Brock's crystal clean sheen on the Steam page made me want to give it a whirl for old time's sake. Brock is pretty much everything anyone who's looking for that old school LucasArts point-and-click style of game could ever want. Multi-layered puzzles and tasks, several optional storylines that you can partake in, many well-written and fleshed out characters, a shocking amount of world building, and oh yeah, it's also a 2D brawler beat-em-up from time to time? There is so much here to love about Brock, and you can clearly see the amount of love and effort thrown at it. You have the option to very liberally throw money at extras in the menu for stills of the devs' work leading up to the game. Every single thing in this demo is made from love and a place of genuine appreciation for the genre, and it pains me to say that I don't think I'll be looking more into this. I would love to sit down and genuinely work out all of the puzzles and mysteries that this game so clearly is tantalizing the player with, but running a YouTube channel, even if it's not my full-time job, requires so much of me in not only my free time but in my actual gaming life as well, that there is zero feasible way that I could ever have the time to play through this. All I will say is that if you are in the mood for an old LucasArts style adventure game, then look no further than Brock, because you aren't going to get much better than this. I can promise you. Now this is an interesting one. Very much inspired by Doom 3, Retchid is a 2003 era FPS throwback that really goes out of its way to recapture the feeling and tone of that id classic. And to be honest, I could pretty much end the review here. Did you like Doom 3? No? Well, move along. Yes? Well, there you go, give it a shot. Obviously there's more to it than that, but not much more. Aesthetically speaking, however, it's right on the money. It feels right out of the id Tech engine and looks almost carbon copied out of the old UAC facility on Mars. Technically speaking, it's a little clunky, but seeing how the demo and theoretically the game seems to have been developed and produced by about 3 people, I'm definitely willing to give that a little bit of a pass. The level that you get to play in the demo is big enough, and it provides a glimpse into quality level design with a lot of pathways and some secrets that are nicely tucked away. It maintains a certain casual level of spooky throughout its run while not ever feeling malicious or truly scary, as if the demons from hell this time around are more or less fellow humans inside a casual Halloween-themed haunted house, waiting to jump around the corner of the darkness and give you a friendly jolt of adrenaline. You'll find PDAs, use notes that you find in files to unlock doors, find more secrets, and pick up and use keycards to progress in a very Doom-like fashion, all the way till the end of the demo. While there isn't much negative to say about Retchid, it's hard to say much other than indifferent praise. It's not that I didn't enjoy my time with the game, as I do think that the people who worked on it obviously did it out of a place of love, but there is a bit to be desired here. The gunplay feels a little bit flat and stiff, and since the enemies of the demo are mostly just bare-fisted zombie dudes, that kinda alleviates any sort of real tension that the game could theoretically muster out of its pixelated and polygonal rotting flesh. I hope that the team fleshes out what is here, because there is something here. It just doesn't seem to be up to snuff with what I feel like it could be. I swear I did not mean to download so many roguelikes. Slay the Spire is one of my all-time favorite games. I have sunk so many hours into it, and even though I'm really not all that great at it, I always find myself coming back to it to some capacity year after year. Its incredibly fast-paced gameplay, even with its head-scratching puzzles that you have to decrypt in order to achieve victory, is what makes it so engaging and replayable. Even if you have a bad run, you can always start another and make rapid progress back to where you were. The amount of builds that are possible among the 4 official characters are very diverse that only add to the infinite replayability. I've seen competitors sprout up over the years, but each one I've played, while always having an interesting mechanic or two and having the potential of becoming great, they always seem to be as disappointing as a useless top deck in the middle of a heated card battle. Beneath Orsea is another deck-building roguelike that cropped up for me this next fest, and just like Deadlink before it, seems to tick all of my favorite roguelike elements while maintaining what made Slay the Spire great. But it comes with all kinds of little additional twists that I can finally see being the successor or at least a true competitor to Slay the Spire. So Beneath Orsea uses a very interesting 3D battleground for its combat, unlike the very flat, plain Slay the Spire. This focus allows for much more interesting combat potential, as with Slay the Spire, your character would not move, and you would just simply pull out an attack, point where you want it to hit, and go about your day. What Beneath Orsea does with the battleground is very cool. So you will have enemies that are close to and far away from you. This means you won't be able to attack enemies that are farther away, and you'll have to risk being chased by the enemies that you leave behind. So right out of the gate, this is an interesting twist to combat. The general implementation of card combat isn't too much different other than that compared to Slay the Spire though. You draw cards, attack enemies, and defend against them. The biggest twists that Beneath Orsea does comes from everything else around the game's combat. In Slay the Spire, you have the option between 4 main characters. Each character has a static ability that will mildly affect how the game is played, and a unique set of cards that you'll be able to obtain on your journey. But in Beneath Orsea, there are 9 characters to choose from. Only 1 character is playable in the demo, but the game presents you with 3 family factions. There are 3 characters per family, each family has a unique faction ability, a unique couple faction cards, and each character will have a few unique cards for themselves. The coolest thing about this though is that you get the option of a partner to bring along with you throughout your quest. The partners appear to be exclusively one of the characters that you did not choose from the family of your main character. And each partner will have a complete unique skill tree that you'll be able to level up between your encounters. The one that you can choose in the demo will give you unique cards, heal you between battles, make you stronger, provide defense, and more. Another nice change from Slay the Spire is that in Spire, whenever you get the option to level up a card, you decide what card gets leveled up and the game does the level up for you. In Orseus, whenever you get the option to level up your cards, each card that has the potential to be leveled up has one of 2 possibilities. This adds a new layer of depth, strategy, and especially when paired with your potential faction partner. In between each encounter, not unlike Slay the Spire, you'll get the choice between options that will benefit you in some form or fashion. Like adding a card to your deck, taking a card out of your deck, healing HP, obtaining an upgrade to your overall character, a static battle enhancer, or leveling up your partner's loyalty. This is my favorite type of roguelike options. Very little is left up to chance, and you always feel like you have some genuine input on what your choice is in just about every single point of your run. But apart from all that, as far as the actual gameplay is concerned, it's perfect. It's everything that you would ever want from a game like this. It's fast, thought-provoking, strategic, and very depthful with the amount of options that the game provides to you, not only in deck building, but the aforementioned strategy of seemingly limitless decisions that you'll be making throughout your game. I cannot wait for Beneath Orseas. I have very little actual nostalgia for the NES era of games, but I have an understanding for what made those games great. A combination of impeccable design and challenge is what toughened up a lot of older games that grew up in the 80s and 90s. Being a 90s kid myself, I had the Super Nintendo, but I still had to endure a lot of cruel design decisions that prevented me from finishing a lot of games that I loved. But as I've gotten older, I have a true appreciation for the white-knuckle gameplay that a lot of these older games strived and struggled for. Shinobi Non Grata, which essentially translates to either Shinobi Unwelcome or Unwelcome Shinobi, but if you really want to get technical it means Unwelcome Hiding or Stolen Unwelcome, but if you really want to get... The game plays like a modern Ninja Gaiden on the NES, but with a mild splash of Contra that fills in some gaps and takes a couple of mechanics out of the picture. But like a true Shinobi, you don't even really notice that they're gone, taken out stealthily in the darkness like a ninja hidden in the shadows. Shinobi Non Grata succeeds precisely at what it's attempting to do in making you feel like a fast-paced killer mowing down all who oppose them. The music shreds and the sound effects are sufficiently succulent to the ears as you swipe your sword at oncoming enemies, double jump to avoid projectiles, and reach high places. As someone who is experienced with these old-style games, but also as someone who is as old as a dripping stalactite in a lost forgotten cave, it makes me doubt my actual skill when it comes to this game, but I found it to be surprisingly difficult, having died multiple times before managing to beat the very first level. The only way I was able to do so was with the aid of your 3 special weapons, the cannon being the most broken thing in your arsenal that essentially can 4 or 5 shot any boss that you come across. Each enemy that you kill in the game will give you these purple orbs that charge up your weapons. Each weapon has its own distinct amount of uses depending on the power of the weapon. The previously mentioned cannon gives you 8 shots, while the shurikens have upwards like... I don't know, do you want to count that? But that's really all I have to say about Shinobi Non Grata. If you enjoy NES-style revival games and the idea of being a badass ninja is appealing to you, then that's seriously all I have to say. If you haven't delved into the NES era and the concept sounds cool and the game is aesthetically pleasing to you, because it is, then the demo is absolutely worth a shot. Just be prepared for a genuine challenge. NES games didn't and don't fuck around. Crackers is an incredibly charming old-school side-scroller that takes a lot more inspiration from the Game Boy games of old. I have a lot more nostalgia with these kind of games, as even though they are based on the same style of game design as the NES counterparts, there was always a certain level of prohibited graphical finesse in the art style, and they were generally a bit more user-friendly and weren't nearly as brutally difficult. Most of the time. Just like Shovel Knight before it, Curse Crackers takes an old-school design philosophy and spruces it up with a modern sheen. In it, you play as Belle, who is attempting to rescue her literal knight in shining armor boyfriend from being kidnapped by her rival, Bonnie. At its heart, Curse Crackers is a very standard platformer with jumping on enemies, collecting coins, traversing a very Mario 3 style world, and hard to reach in secret areas that provide numerical value bonuses for finding them. But what makes Curse Crackers stand out is your little buddy, Chime. He's essentially like a little ghost bell that you can use to throw at enemies and collect hard-to-reach coins. But the real trick with Chime is that you can use him to bounce off of, and that is a super well-realized mechanic. Chime is very versatile, being able to be thrown in any direction and can theoretically be thrown indefinitely but can always be brought back with the push of a button. But the coolest thing about Chime being able to be thrown is that the game is designed completely around you utilizing Chime to access hard-to-reach places. Now, can I get to all those places? No. I'm not that skilled with the mechanic, but I did get to some, and that's a very rewarding feeling knowing that you've leveled up, so to speak, and understanding the game's mechanics. There are also some nice quality of life mechanics, like a quick run, slide, jump mechanic that almost seems like it was entirely put into the game so that players could speedrun the shit out of it. There were so many instances where a slide jump into another would land me directly on an enemy, which would have me jump off of them and plop me right back onto the stage for more dashing shenanigans. I can see this game being busted in terms of speedrunning, and I think for a game that plays itself off as an old school handheld title, it's a brilliant little underlying focus of the game's design, hidden away like a bell on a cat underneath some bed sheets. Well, this was an insane way to introduce myself to the Monster Hunter series. I have played one Monster Hunter game previously, and it was one of the PSP entries. I played it for like an hour, I hated it, I didn't get it, and I haven't touched the series since then. But recently Capcom announced that the latest expansion for Monster Hunter Rise was getting its very own demo, and that you could play it multiplayer. So I asked a friend of mine, who I found out later is apparently a veteran of the series. They haven't played Rise before though, so even they were a little taken aback by some of the game's mechanics. But as someone who has essentially zero experience with the entire series, holy shit. I would say that if you haven't played any of these games before, then this demo isn't a bad place to start, I think. In the demo, you get upwards of 14 preset characters and weapon layouts, 2 animal companions that play very differently, and you get 4 hunts that range in difficulty and the amount of times that you can die before getting kicked out of the demo. Each one is pretty well balanced in accelerated difficulty. That being said, my friend who played with me told me that normally you only get 3 cumulative deaths per hunt, and in the demo you get upwards of 9 in all of them except the most difficult, where you get the standard 3. This game is just a fucking blast. There was a point in my playtime where I literally started going, You fly all over the battleground with a weird air grapple mechanic that you can use to get an upward trajectory on your targets and plummet towards the ground with your objectively ridiculous gargantuan weaponry. You can chain hits together, dealing massive damage, get thrown around haphazardly by a giant dragon, avoid AoE effects constantly, and the best part about it, at least with a friend, is coordinating during the heat of battle, acknowledging enemy attacks and executing accordingly. It's just a really fucking good time. The biggest hurdle that I experienced in playing this demo is something that apparently has lasted throughout, like, all of the Monster Hunter games, and that's the controls. When first picking them up, they are so ass backwards, it's almost ludicrous. We're talking controls like holding the left bumper and pressing X or B to maneuver through your consumable items. Holding left trigger allows you to rotate through what I can only assume is a rotating special attack list that you rotate by hitting Y and B together? Holding RB to run, A to dodge? It's a mess. My friend tells me that it will make sense the more I play it, and I believe them, but going into it blind is almost an actual nightmare. In fact, the whole demo, really, if you don't know what you're doing, is kind of a nightmare, and my friend also said something along the lines of, yeah, I can only imagine what that was like for you as your first Monster Hunter game. And then they laughed at me. I feel like the actual game of Monster Hunter is a lot more than what this demo is, but what the demo showed me has me incredibly intrigued as to what the series has been hiding from me for so many years. The franchise has a fervent fan base, and I feel like I've only done less than look at the surface of the game's many layers. Like looking at the tunic layer of an onion before my eyes have watered, imagining the flavors that lie underneath that flaky crust. At the time of writing and recording this, Monster Hunter Rise is still on sale, and it's very tempting to take the plunge. This demo may have gotten me on the bandwagon.
Stop!
Loathful is an interesting, stylized first-person horror game where exploration and puzzle solving seems to be the main components. There is a hefty dose of atmosphere that holds the entire game on its dark, dank shoulders. The game takes place in what I can only assume is a phony mansion, but it leads into an underground facility a la Resident Evil, and in a somewhat unexpected and pleasant twist, there seems to be some serious supernatural shenanigans that tinges on Silent Hill with its use of the more recent visualizations of the transitions into the other world being ever present in the mansion's basement. The thing about this demo is that while it does tend to lean on jump scares being its main fright mechanic, it utilizes those very well. There are only 2 in the demo, but both of them work really well towards making the entire game after them so much more tense and suspenseful. A lot of games that attempt to be scary and rely on jump scares run into this problem where the game takes place in an environment that has no tension or even really anything remotely creepy aspects apart from the fact that the game is just, dark. Whenever the game attempts to frighten you with a loud jump scare, even if they're done right, they eventually come across as annoying when that's the only thing the game really has going for it in terms of spooks. But Loathful knows when and how to utilize its scares. It builds an uncomfortable atmosphere right from the beginning with this big empty foyer with the old-timey music swinging in the background. And as you wander around the empty hallways of this faux manor and you hear the music slowly trail off, it leaves you feeling uncomfortable. Like you're abandoning the only sense of normalcy in a very strange and unknowable place. Loathful also knows how to utilize darkness very effectively. For over half the demo, you don't have a flashlight, and it takes a quarter of the demo to even find yourself in nothing but darkness. So when you first find yourself stepping into the deep bowels of the underground with nothing to light your way, it's very silent, ominous, and uncomfortable, and you're being led by these randomly appearing signs with arrows being held by these wooden figurines, and after a while, you see them appearing in places that you know that they shouldn't be, and it's hard not to feel a malevolence emanating from them. Despite being a very simple concept, and honestly a very simple execution of that simple idea, Loathful teases a lot more to come in the final moments of the demo, and it has me more intrigued than a lot of the other demos that I played during this Next Fest. Loathful genuinely left me shook with its scares and utilized that discordant status of my mental state after being so rattled to continue to dig the nail further into my mind. And that's it! Those were most of the demos that I played at Next Fest. But before I go, I want to rank out all of my favorite demos because YouTube does indeed love some lists. But I also want to give out some honorable mentions. Spiritual is an interesting digital board game that is based on a classic grid-based system where the central mechanic is built around flipping over individual grids and revealing specific nature tiles and using them to attack other players on the field. There are many characters that you can pick from, and all of them have a wide variety of special abilities that can be swapped out to tackle all of the other possible opponents and their ability layouts. Now, I love board games a lot. Like, a lot. And just like my favorite roguelikes this year, my favorite board games are ones that provide asymmetry and choice. I think that Spiritual does successfully accomplish this, and I was audibly going, wow, to all of the combinations of characters and special abilities. But the reason I'm only talking about it here and not on the main list is because the central main mechanic, while interesting, just isn't that great. I feel like know how competent your character's abilities are, the central mechanic of having to flip over 2 of the same tiles is just too random for me to really get engaged with. Maybe using this main mechanic as like a secondary one and having a more reliable way to initiate combat would be better, but I don't know. I'm not sure what would make this click more for me, but I think that if you think the concept is interesting, then it's probably worth at least giving this one a shot. This demo is way too short, but I've beaten the original Hook. It's a super clever puzzle game that utilizes the namesake to what I thought was its maximum potential. I was dead wrong because Hook 2 introduces The third dimension. You only get 5 or so puzzles in the demo, and none of them are very difficult, but I'm only putting this here in the honorable mentions and not the actual list because of the absolute brazenly short length of the demo. Just note that the first Hook game is an impeccable puzzle game. This game almost made it onto my main list, and to be honest, it probably should be there instead of the Backrooms games, but I made this video in the order that you're seeing it, and at this point I just need to finish this fucking video. Cultic is a very good old-school first-person shooter that takes a lot of its inspiration from the original Blood game, with a little dash of like Duke Nukem 3D in there in terms of world and level design. The gunplay is incredibly responsive, it's shockingly polished, but partly why I didn't put it in the main video initially is because, fuck me, it's hard. I couldn't finish it. I'm on a pretty strict time limit here with this video, and at some point I have to acknowledge that it's time to move on to the next game, or the next portion of the script. If you like Blood or old school style FPSs that aren't Doom, then give Cultic a watch. Okay, list time. In order of my least favorite to favorite demos of Next Fest 2022. The Backrooms Found Footage. The Backrooms Exploration. Spirital. Retchid. Biocrisis Return to the Lab. Brock the Investigator. Perish. Hook 2. Apocalyptic Vibes. Shinobi Non Grata. Gloomwood. Mortal Sin. Loathful. Curse Crackers, For Whom the Belle Toils. Cultic. Monster Hunter Rise. Moonscars. Agent 64, Spies Never Die. Ghost Song. Beneath Orsea. Selaco. Cult of the Lamb. Angerfoot. Deadlink. Are we done? Am I done?
Hey, am I done?
So yeah, that was my Next Fest experience. I'm definitely going to be doing that every single year. That was a really good time. I found a lot of good games. I found some not so good games. Some games I didn't even talk about. Those ones, talk about those ones. What am I doing? It's very late. I'm very tired. Thank you for watching. I hope that you made it this far. If you did, I could kiss you on the cheek. Mwah. And then I'll do it on the other one too. Thank you. Took a melatonin. I'm very tired. It's hitting me kind of hard right now. You ever fall asleep on melatonin? You fucking pass out like a rock. You don't wake up for 9 hours. It's crazy. Good night. Love your face. I love your show.
Tomato is a fruit, but it's also a vegetable.